Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. And today we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to be opening up more and having more of a vulnerable conversation here with Alex Hart. And we're going to be sharing our personal journeys overcoming generational trauma and our path to healing, how that has impacted us and our life. And this is not one of those really sexy, fun mindset types of conversations, but this is that deeper work that I think is takes a lot of courage and strength, but it is so fulfilling and just so impactful. So I'm just really grateful. The other day, Alex Hurt and I met because we're working together with We're Evolved, and it's so exciting when I meet clients that inspire me and spark this creativity. And we started to get into this conversation, and I just knew I had to bring her to the table to go deeper with this. So, Alex is a contemplative practitioner. I hope I didn't mess that up. Thank you so
Contemplative
much for coming.
practitioner. Yes. Hi, Olivia. It's so good to see you.
It's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming here today.
Happy to be here. So, why don't we just start with a little bit of naming where you're located right now? I thought that could be a great place. Since I'm a contemplative practitioner, I'll bring in a couple of these practices into our conversation. So, I like to start. Let's arrive. Where are you right now?
I am currently in the desert in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Awesome.
What about you?
I am in the forest. Um, Southwest Washington, up above the White Salmon River, and I'm in a little cabin in the woods.
Very
Tell me a little bit about, since we're going to have this conversation today around generational trauma and taking up a healing path to work with healing and resolving some of that trauma. So I'm curious about, your heritage, your family. Where did you grow up? Who are your parents? And what cultural heritage is in your body? So if you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, so I grew up in Peoria, Arizona. So it's over on the West Valley. I would say, kind of a blue collar, middle class type of community. And my parents are both Hispanic. So, and I am also part Puerto Rican. And, I grew up over on the West Valley in Arizona with one sister, and I'm the oldest. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, so my family heritage comes from a mix of, I'm half Norwegian. I have I think 100% Norwegian father who was adopted into a Greek family with another Scandinavian brother he grew up with, both adopted. And then on my mother's side is a German heritage, French, English, and a lot of Western European. And they immigrated over to first into Iowa, my maternal side, and then they moved out to the West, born in this little town of Hood River, which is interesting because I'm about 5 minutes from there. And I was born in Portland, Oregon, and been a Oregon native, lived in Oregon my whole life. And yeah, I came from a family that on my maternal side was going back to my grandparents, a lot of poverty and not a lot of opportunity. The women were not educated. No, hardly any folks in my family had degrees, or even went to college. And on my father's side, he was adopted into a family of new money. So he had a black nanny, an all white family that took care of him. He had a bell that they would ring and have the help come, and a lot of undertones of racism in the culture he grew up with, and a lot of privilege, a lot of access. So I have these two sides that are, bringing in this history of poverty And also creativity, so not just to speak to the wounded, but lots of creativity, tons of resilience from my maternal line. And then on my paternal side, with my father, lots of also he's so innovative and creative, and also a lot of addiction on that side. So there's both this shadow and obviously all these beautiful aspects as well. But that's where I
Wow,
yeah.
shared in so much more depth than I did. So I appreciate that. I'll take that as an opportunity to expand a little bit. But for both sides, my dad's side and my mother's side are histories of poverty. And
Mhm,
on my mother's side, it was migrant workers. So really in the fields, like doing like my grandfather worked really hard his entire life, really brutal labor. It was very oppressive work. And the same thing on my dad's side, just so much oppression and just being having to do really tough labor, like
mhm.
mining.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so the women were really, again, uneducated in that history, really having a lot of kids. So, a lot of big families, right? I think my grandmother was the oldest of 12 or 13,
Mhm,
but it
mhm.
was just, and because of all of these extra children and not a lot of parents and not a lot of money, I mean, that's a lot of trauma, a lot of shadow there, with addiction and those types of things that come through. And so there's just a lot of pain and suffering, I would say, and oppression. There's beauty there as well. There's definitely a lot of love and light there as well, but it's been just even sit and understand and really even take time to process all of that heaviness that I know is in my bloodline.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the thing there's a lot of power in it sounds like maybe we're doing something really simple here, but we're actually bringing out into the open the lived experience of probably every single person that is residing in within Western culture. Like if we go back far enough, show me an ancestor that hasn't been in survival, been in war, and or had childhoods where their needs were actually met. And so then we're looking at hundreds, thousands of years of many family systems that are emotionally, physically, sexually, spiritually filled with different expressions of abuse, neglect, and ultimately not getting what we need to actually be able to even get close to wanting to actualize what any human being would want to do within their life. And so I think that this frame is really, for me, has been really important because it opens my compassion when and it softens of the blame that I didn't get what I needed. And from that place, then I can say, okay, well, I didn't get what I needed. My parents didn't get what they needed. My grandparents, my great back and back. But how can I then begin the process of arriving in this life and in this body, not continually being impacted by that trauma? So, what does that look like? How does one, if they say, all right, I'd like to orient now away, turning away from this trauma that has been here and actually start to come into a deeper relationship with my body, with my mind, with my heart? How does one begin? How does one begin that process? And so that would be my question for you. It's apparent in the work that, just that we've only spent a few hours together, but that this is important to you, that developing the yourself and growth and the mindset work that you do, and then what you've accomplished in your career. So what, if you're open to sharing, what sparked the start of your path towards healing?
I feel that I've been a healer since I was born. I feel innately it was a calling for me. I was deeply empathic, deeply in tune emotionally to the needs of everyone around me since I was a very young age. And I believe that I've also been a really strong, resilient soul as well to be able to put so many people's needs in front of my own for a lot of my life. And as I think about this, I've also had an amazingly massive vision since I was really young, and it didn't come from my environment. So I truly believe that this journey is bigger than me. I believe that it's really a source and a greater power that is fueling this deep desire to move my community away from suffering, away from trauma, away from oppression. And as a woman of color from an environment where even the men were deeply oppressed, you can only imagine what that meant for the women and the oppression and how deep a dark hole that is. And so being the first woman to break these chains and shackles and become financially independent and wealthy and free and liberated, I feel it's my responsibility to give this an energy because it was really tough for me to break out of this because I wanted to bring everyone with me. And I don't think that you can't force people to do healing. You can't force them to go on that same journey. But, and I'm still how to be the guide and light and provide healing to my community without necessarily directly speaking to them. And so in my own way, I'm really still finding my way to be able to give back to my community and the broader community as well, that any person of color is something I'm really passionate helping to shed light, but all humans, not just people of color. But I just think that specifically that's because I speak from that perspective in history. So I would say the journey started once I realized when I started to rise above my environment and I realized just how deeply embedded the biases, the envy, the scarcity, and how I was being pulled down by my environment and attacked psychologically, spiritually. It just, I was like, this isn't right. This isn't even them speaking. This is their
Mhm.
trauma. This is their conditioning. And they can't even see it. So I can have compassion for that. I really do, because I understand how tough it is to untangle. And I also believe it was a privilege for me to create the space to have so much attention be put on my own healing. And I do acknowledge that.
Who have been, if you're open to sharing, because we never do this work alone, if we're taking a and saying, I have an aspiration that I want to deeply connect with the wholeness of who I am, with my goodness, and let go of a lot of this trauma. There's a lot of, I think it's impossible to do that alone. And so I'm curious about who are some of the mentors in your life. Maybe not, maybe they intersect with business because I know that that's such a part of your world. But who have been some of the people that have deeply helped and supported you and educated you around this type of inner work?
Yeah, so there's been so many to name, but I'll name a few notable that really moved me and really helped me get some serious breakthroughs on breaking free from, the anchors of the past that were really keeping me stuck from moving forward. And the first person that comes to mind, her name's Sherry. Sherry was somebody that was a combination of a therapist and a performance coach. Because, and for me, it was important to have that combination because I don't want to just look in the rearview mirror
Mhm.
because I can't change the past, but it is influencing my current identity. I want to be empowered to integrate and all that energy and change it to what I want it to be and align with the identity I want to be now, which is a really empowering, uplifting leader, mother, friend, and loving human, right? And
Mhm.
so as I was working through that with her, it was clear to me, I just got fed up with that because I'm like, am I still talking about my inner child? Like, aren't I done with this by now? Like, it was just the layers of layers of shutting. And what I learned along that journey with her is just how aware I was at such a young age of everything that was happening, which made the cuts even deeper because I could see everything and I
Mhm.
was aware of it. And I was so in tune with my emotions as well, but I still was aware of the suffering and feeling it even deeper. So it was just so imprinted in my subconscious, being such a empathetic and highly, I would say, emotionally intelligent person. That was work that it just, the best way to put it is there were layers of parts of me that were really living scared
Mhm.
and shameful. And without healing those parts of me, she would call it the little who's, right? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Olivia? Is that because the different versions would come out and it would be clear they would be running the show and acting out with my company. And it was obvious that I was having an activation of one of those past versions of me. And she would help me identify these patterns where it wasn't me now running that decision and that behavior. So just bringing awareness to that was really powerful because those versions aren't going anywhere. They're still here. I just now have better tools and awareness to be able to properly integrate them and them to a calm place where we can slowly be aligned with the adult Olivia who's in control now, right? Um,
Yeah.
other
I'm
person,
so
Olivia,
I'm so
oh, go ahead.
glad you brought that in, that her name was Sherry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, because all these part just mention internal family systems, which is parts work, which is, a lot of psychotherapists bring that in, but what you're talking about are these young ones were scared and then became fragmented from the sense of, this whole, congruent you, and show up in certain times when you might be scared or overwhelmed or tired or haven't eaten or whatever, all different kinds of things that will trigger certain young parts to show up. And what I can hear as you're speaking is that you are very committed to not ripping those parts out of you. I love that you said they're still here,
Mhm.
but that Olivia in your adult self gets to say, "Yeah, I come and you didn't say this, but here, come sit on my lap. Like, I got you now. You don't have to be back there anymore. You don't have to be back in these where there's no other adult in the room but you as a young person who isn't even an adult." And so I think that for myself as well, it's like our neuroses, our places within us where we've been wounded are not just going to magically disappear in this human existence. They will repeatedly show up. We're going to get triggered. We're going to be dysregulated. Having some goal of saying, I have to 100% always be regulated is like, you're not a human. You're not living if you are regulated all the time. Like, that is a, um, unrealistic expectation. So I'm appreciating as you name that for people that are maybe just starting out on doing this kind of inner work or working with young wounded aspects of themselves or coming into relationship with the trauma that they have experienced and family has experienced, is to be really humble that we all have this. It's how we shift our relationship to these aspects, and so that they aren't in the driver's seat anymore. And so our more adult self that can lead and actually is present here now can be in charge of the autonomy of our life, which in a way is an aspect of being freer. I wouldn't say it's complete freedom in the spiritual sense, but we have more freedom than we're not held in the past. So I'm just I'm with you on that. I love that work is so um huge. And I think there a lot of people may have like I don't back there. And there's a lot of ways that we don't have to go back into the memory, but we can say, how can I come into relationship with those young ones? And first, it's through self awareness of being aware when they show up in the first place, when these young aspects of us come out. And I think often it's when we are, yeah, feeling afraid or in overwhelm, you know. Most, I think, stress states, not all stress states, but a lot of stress states, there's probably a young part in there that is operating.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
I'll just name one other person that because it was a really notable moment. Even though
Mm.
I've done so much investment in my healing, I've done retreats, I've done all kinds of things because it's directly impacted my ability to evolve as a leader, as a business owner, as a mother, as a friend. It's been huge. So I just know that it's directly increasing the quality of my life, and it's a priority in my life still. But when I think about, I think it was 2021, I had just left a business partnership. It was a really successful business partnership. It was really hard for me to walk away, but I started over in 2021 and I thought it was going to be easy, thought it was going to be simple, but I didn't realize me going alone and owning it all was going to bring up so much resistance internally that it was like I was flooded. My
Mhm,
nervous system was constantly flooded. And
mhm,
it was just this need to prove myself and this intensity of just pressure and fear. And so
mm.
I hired Betsy Peak to help me clear out all this shit. For that was really what I needed. I knew she'd help me because she'd been my friend for a while and I was just hearing about the work she had done with like, healing, reprogramming the subconscious mind, all of that. And I remember we were having this conversation and I just was feeling so much guilt and shame for this next journey and where I was going to be going. I almost just knew it was going to be crazy success, but I just was already, because I was getting visions of it, right? And I would
Mhm,
get these crazy visions of like luxury. And I felt shame for that. I'm like, why am I so materialistic? Why do I keep getting these visions of all these things? And I was just, she's just like, that's not, we did some meditation work. And needless to say, in my programming, I started to get some like images from my great grandmother, like, who literally was like, had no freedom, no luxury, no voice, nothing. And I'm like, maybe my desires just run deeper than I can understand. And maybe that's okay. And
mhm.
maybe they're there because I have the ability to actualize it. And why is that right or wrong? And really just starting to let go of some of this junk in my body. And that's the best way I could put it with the work we did. And it was like cutting anchors off of my back. I can't
Uh-huh,
explain it, like where I just felt lighter after these sessions. And that's the best way I can describe it. It's like it was energetic for me to just release all these baggages of guilt, shame, and just self-criticism and judgment. For what I was desiring and my drive and
mhm,
my want to put myself first by walking away and all the guilt that came from leaving that business partnership. And it really brought up things that just didn't make rational sense emotionally. So I knew all that emotion was not mine. Like intuitively, I knew that.
yeah,
Now I know with epigenetics and everything that that's seriously the trauma gets passed down generation after generation and it's running your programming. Now I know that, but I just really wish more people knew, so that's why I wanted to share that specific example.
mm. That's a great example, and so clear that you were able to see, "This isn't mine, like, this comes from somewhere else, and I can release this, like, this doesn't need to be taking up residence in my body and affecting then, how not being able to actually go towards what you so clearly have a sense of knowing what you want. You know what you want, so and you have the energy and the intelligence and ability to go for that, so go for it. And so, yeah, that it sounds that's energy work. Is that what Betsy does?
Yeah.
Yeah. Super cool.
What about you? What stands out to you on who helped you with your journey and what stands out the most?
I've had so many mentors and incredible blessed with just absolutely incredible teachers. And Um, let's see. So going back in my 20s, I connected with this woman named Dia, who's a psychotherapist, and she is a Hakomi therapist and actually teaches. And Hakomi is a um, method of therapy that really works with loving presence and very present moment oriented. It's very slow work. Sometimes people will go to Hakomi for the first time and they'll be like, what what did we do? It's just like very subtle work. And Dia really helped me to identify that I was abused. And there was a lot of power that came forward, not trying to make my lived experiences something other than what they actually were. And being the peacemaker in the family, the sunshine of the family, the light family from a young age, likely also as a coping mechanism, of like, this is how I can keep myself safe, is to be charming. And um, that was a real big turning point for me of deep self-honesty of this isn't something I have to be ashamed of, but there's power in naming out in the open and being witnessed. And I did a lot of group work within Hakomi as well. So it was not just with a psychotherapist. And then the power of doing that within a group setting of I'm not alone. I said that at the beginning, show me someone who hasn't experienced emotional, physical, verbal, psychological, or sexual abuse, even just in one family system. Show me somebody. So that was a turning point for me actually in reclaiming my power and being able to learn about what healthy anger is and being able to get to the deeper places within myself of where the hurt was. And that prior to that, I didn't have anybody holding space for me to actually be able to then go and, as those young parts, like you talked about, let their voices be heard, let their pain be heard, and then it can actually release. And that's an important step I just want to name, like for listeners, of like, well, how does one even begin the process of healing around something like abuse? Well, having a safer container of somebody that can offer non-judgmental, compassionate presence that's highly skilled as a therapist also, or a healing practitioner. And it is first in acknowledging what was true and not going back into it, not get collapsing into the intensity of it, not losing yourself in the experience, but then being able to stay here now and I can witness and be with my own hurt. This really hurt me. This really happened. This has the entire, my young adult life. And so that was a huge turning point in starting to metabolize some of what I'd gone through that I'd used, dissociation and other ways in my charisma and my magnetism and charm to almost kind of distance from the reality of what I've actually been through and how alone I had been. And so that was very transformative. And then I started to see like, wow, this me on like, I want to do this kind of work with people. And then the other, I can pause there. I just said a lot. So
Well,
yeah.
there's so much there that I wanted to unpack, but I think it's fascinating to hear your experience when you said you learned about healthy anger, which is absolutely the opposite of what I learned because I grew up in a lot of anger, a lot of yelling and
Yeah.
intensity, right? And
Yeah.
control and oppressive type environment. And so I only know anger. And it wasn't until I could move past underneath that was the really sad, softer emotions and learning how to tap into that that really needed to get cleared out was really the opposite for me. So I'd love to hear what your experience was with this healthy anger and what you mean by that.
Yeah, what I mean by that is that when I went back, when I started to be able to, and even in my life today, connect when anger arises, it's not something I default to. So like some might say I'm intense, but I'm also like an easygoing person and I'm highly forgiving. And so healthy anger for me means when that comes up, first thing I'm going to become aware of is this is a cue that something within my system is trying to protect me right now. So this is actually not coming from a place of hatred. This is actually coming from a place of very important self protection. And so then it tells me, okay, I'm going to actually go towards this instead of run away from it, because what I was patterned in my upbringing is that if anger arose, I would be punished. So if I tried to protect myself, I'd be punished and silenced for that. So what I had to relearn is that actually when this anger arises, it is a cue for me to stay in connection to, like, where is that coming up in my own body? Oh, I can feel my heart rate increasing. I can feel almost my muscles want my hand wanting to make a fist. I can feel this, like my energy moving out and expanding and taking up space in a different way. And then from there, I can just allow myself to feel that and then start to say, okay, is there something that I need to move into action around? Do I need to say no to something? Do I need to set a limit? Do I need to communicate a boundary in a certain way? And then it can move into discerning action, because it's very important not to, for me, not place of anger, but to allow myself to feel it moving through my body until it completes. And then, like you said, something will kind of uncover in that is like, oh, this is me needing to step into more clarity around a certain thing in a relationship, or I need to say no to something, or I overextended, whatever the thing might be. So then it helps to clarify action, and it helps to clarify communication. So I think anger can really serve us if we don't get swept into it and then act out and lash out and attack, and then we're perpetuating the cycle of violence, but actually use it to inform more discerned decision making that centers what are these younger parts, what are they needing, and then what do I need right now. So that's how I understand healthy anger at this point.
That's beautiful. I think I you, I see anger as a signal that a boundary was crossed, and I need to do better at communicating that boundary and so that we can maintain the relationship. I want to
Mhm.
segue since I know we've got a few minutes left. I think sharing one of like the biggest patterns that we've had to heal, behavioral
Mm,
patterns that I
mm,
was the most impactful and how you've done it. And
mhm,
obviously for me, I can immediately think of people pleasing, coming from a Latina culture. We're known, our existence in that culture that I came from was to serve the men and the family. And that never appealed to me, even as a young child. I never wanted to be in the kitchen behind a stove, that I wanted to be outside, right? And I was always just never feeling like I fit that cultural paradigm. So naturally, I was really rebelling against it, but also deeply wanting to be accepted by it. So it was this just like split, broken identity. And having to really come into alignment with myself was really having to sort of spend more time getting to know my body and what I really want and start to really ask those questions. What do I want? What do I need? Those were new primary questions that started to guide my life. And it was not easy to break that mold when that's not the primary question of your environment. You can be seen as selfish, egotistical. That was required for me to become who I am here, is start to prioritize my own needs. And
mhm.
doing that earlier in my life has been a lifesaver, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel you on that. You got to ask the question because I was just listening to you. So ask the question
I'm
again.
going to ask you, okay, last question.
Yeah.
What is the biggest behavioral pattern you've had to heal, and how did you do it? How did it impact your life?
Sure. I think one of the biggest relational patterns I've shifted is how I communicate and the way in which I listen. And that wasn't modeled to me. So really being present and actually I listen to what the person is saying. That may sound really simple, but that isn't the way that anybody within my family operates. The communication is about a lot of interrupting, a lot of talking about nothing. I bring a depth to every interaction that I have with no matter who I'm with. And so I want to get to the heart of the matter. I want to really know who you are. I don't really care about what you do or what you've done or those kinds of parts of life. I want to know, like, who are you at your core? And so a huge pattern would be deep realness.
I
Like,
love that.
I'm not being fake. Like, this is who I am. And what I've found is that when people engage with me, that it's so refreshing that I'm not trying to get something from you. I'm not trying to put something on. I actually want to deeply connect. And so that is a completely different way of orienting to relationship. And then I also just broke all of the norms around what it is to even be, a woman, female bodied person, and let go of all of that. My trajectory was set up, you'll be a pastor's wife or you'll lead worship in your church or be a missionary. And I said no to all of that. So already what I've accomplished as, like, yes, earning more money than anybody within my family system. Okay, that's awesome. Being able to do work that I love, being able to live on land, have a property that I have, those are all very new things that I'm deeply grateful for. I think that comes out of my commitment to being true to myself. And as you said, that is a departure from being, that is selfish. I know that supports other people in being able to do that too, and say, I'm prioritizing my own self and my own needs. So yeah, there's a lot we could say there, but yeah.
Well, I will attest that you do operate on deep realness because I felt that immediately, when we connected. And that is actually, I thought really with me because, being able to show up fully and with a deep desire to understand someone underneath the surface is so special, and it's such a gift to that person. It's so nice to just own it, right? And just be it. And that's exactly how I move as well. I'm not really interested in the surface because that's only part of the story. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
I appreciate
Thanks for
it.
the
If
conversation.
resonated with what you said, wants to connect with you, how can they best connect with you?
Yeah, my website's theheartcenter.us, so they can go there. My email's on there. My email's alex@theheartcenter.us if someone wants to email me. So, yeah, those are 2 ways.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Yeah. Thank you, Olivia.